There are a couple of things that I look for in a guest. One is passion and a desire to do what the guest feels fated or destined to do. Makes sense, right? And this podcast is about creating your own reality. So, the other thing that I also love are things that get me out of my comfort zone because to create, you have to think outside of the box, or else you're just kind of manufacturing the same old thing. Well, today's guest hits the mark on both of those things. And I'm with Jim Marshall today. Jim is the author of Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomenon. He's going to share what Septemics is and how it can help you to get to know yourself better and potentially help you find your direction in life. Thanks for being here, Jim.
You're welcome. Hello, Laura.
So, the line in the book that really caught my attention was I had been trying to write this book my entire adult life. And I get that. I know what it is to have an idea turning around in your head, forming, and no matter how much time passes, it just doesn't let go. And then one day it comes together. What was that process like for you?
Well, the actual moment at which Septemics was born was when it manifested mathematically. I had these scales that I had observed empirically, and I'll tell you later how that happened, that I knew were correct just from direct observation. Well, I had this 6-level scale that I had been using for decades. Well, one day, pondering a difficult client, I realized that that client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. Now, as soon as I saw what the level was obvious to me where to insert it. And as soon as I inserted it, the scale manifested mathematically. In that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. So all of this data jumped out at me. That is an inherently mathematical phenomenon. So at that moment, I said, whoa, whatever this is, it has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. That was in 1995. That was the moment at which Septemics was born. Now, Septemics did not get a name until right before I published the book. I just had this thing, and I said, what the hell am I going to call this? So I called it Septemics, which means of or pertaining to 7. So that was what some people call the aha moment of that, where I saw how big this was, that I had discovered something entirely new.
So
That
I
could
want to
really
get into that, but before I want to get a little bit more foundation on you, really.
Okay.
So what I'm perceiving from what you're saying is that you are a systems thinker and you see patterns. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what sort of patterns were you seeing when you had the 6 system going?
Well, what was happening was I had a long career as a human development engineer, where I worked one-on-one with hundreds of clients over many thousands of hours. And I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told that to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I simply observed and wrote down these various scales. And I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. And that happened thousands of times. And each time that happened, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew nothing about this. So this is like the Fibonacci sequence.
Right.
There are creatures that have Fibonacci numbers within their physiognomy. They don't know anything about numbers, but this has been going on for billions of years. I mean, how far back would you have to go with a sunflower to find one that didn't have a Fibonacci number in it? I don't know, maybe a billion years. So Fibonacci came along and he looked at these numbers. He said, I have these specific numbers who keep coming up. What are these numbers? And he reverse engineered the formula from those numbers as to how to calculate those numbers. And he gave it to us, and it's called the Fibonacci sequence. This is essentially what happened with me. I saw something, I saw there was a pattern there, and I used my polymathic intellect and my engineering skills to engineer it into something that really helps people.
So does this mean that humans don't have free will?
Oh, no, doesn't mean that at all. It just means there are patterns.
Mm.
You have all kinds of free will. I mean, that's a very deep philosophic question. But at the level of this book, I would say, no, that's not what this is about. This is just about, see, Septemics is a descriptive science, the way botany and zoology and astronomy are, right? You look at the stars, they're there. Okay? You can make calculations about them. You can use that data in a variety of ways. And so we have astronomical science. We have astrophysics. Okay? It's all based on observing the stars and other star-like phenomena. So that is what this is about. I just observed this, and in completely in keeping with my scientific background, I recorded it, and then I was able to use it to create Septemics.
Okay. So what's the magic in 7?
Well, there's a whole section in the book called Why 7. Actually, it's on my website if you want to read it. It's in this section called Introduction to Septemics, which is the longest section of the book because it explains in a general way, without going into the specific skills, how it works, why it's constructed, what it's about. The Y7 is actually a mathematical explanation. I don't mind giving it to you, but it probably would be better for me to try to give people some context as
Okay.
to what this is before I do that.
Okay. So what is it?
So let me say one sentence that would introduce me in the context of Septemics. I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. This is very much like Isaac Newton, who put a beam of white light through a prism and got the rainbow, thus showing that white light was composed of these 7 colors, Roy G. Biv. So that is essentially what I did for 35 different subjects of human affairs. I was able to break each one of these subjects down into a spectrum of 7 levels, which occur in a specific order. In other words, if you look at a rainbow, it's always red, orange, yellow, etc. It's in a specific order. And that's what these levels are. There's no opinion in this. I am a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. So my opinion is not even relevant to this discussion. 2 engineers, and of course I've known many of them, opinions and beliefs are utterly irrelevant. They have nothing to do with what we do. So if you came to me and said, Jim, I want you to put a bridge over this river, it's about 25 yards wide, I would not accept that data from you. I would go out there with a laser and I would say, is this the exact point where you want the bridge? Yes. And I would throw that laser and it would tell me that it was 23.9 meters. That is the data that I would use. That's not an opinion. So that is how Septemics was created. It was constructed in the same way that Isaac Newton constructed the 3 laws of motion. He saw it and he described it.
So are they you said I think you said 35 scales. Are
Mhm.
there others yet to be discovered? Is it finite? It's 35 and that's it?
Well, let me say this. There probably are other scales. They're probably beyond the capacity of human intelligence. In other words, I suspect if we go to other planets, they will have septemics, and they probably will have, if they're smarter than we are, they probably will have more scales than we do. I don't think a large number more, but there's probably, because I'm not asserting I found them all. Now, having said that, uh, I've been working with this material most of my life, and I worked on the book itself 25 years. So it's been 29 years since the book was first written. And through this period, I've had many collaborations with colleagues and students and people who were in a position to present other scales. I specifically ask in the book, if you come up with a scale, please tell me about it. Okay? Nobody has done that. One fellow, a fellow engineer, did come up with a scale and sent it to me, and it turned out to be not a septemic scale. I mean, it had 7 levels, but that's about it. There's very specific things. See, septemics is based on mathematics. And if it doesn't have mathematics embedded in it, it's not a septemic scale. Now, when you read the book, it's not like studying math. I went out of my way to not make it mathematical so that people who are allergic to math would not have that as a barrier. But underneath it, it's mathematical.
Okay. So you have scales for individuals and scales for groups. What's
Yes.
the difference and why do we need both?
Well, scales for individuals apply to an individual. You can say, okay, where am I, Laura, on this scale? Or the scale of this scale? The group scales apply to a group. It's not going to make sense really to say, where is Laura on the scale?
Okay.
You could say, where is this relationship on the scale of relationships? Or where is this government on the scale of government? You see?
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that makes total sense.
or like, for example, sexuality is a group scale because it's inherently a group activity. It is intrinsically more than one people involved. So it's a group scale. So, that's just something that I analyzed after the fact. I looked at these and saw, yeah, some of these apply to an individual, some of these apply to a group. And so I segregated them that way in the book.
Okay. So one of the things that I picked up on the in the book is that you say that you have to know where you are, and I say that all the time too because I think everything's relative to time and space. What's the importance of knowing where you are in regards to septemics?
Okay, let me explain it this way. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the time, the date, the location, and perhaps how to get there, right? If they don't
Yes.
do that, it's not going to. So, in other words, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get somewhere if you don't know where you're starting from, which means where you are, where you're headed, which is your destination, okay, and how to get to your destination, okay? So now this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly. Most people do not know where they are, where they're going, or how to get there
Yeah.
in their lives. So much so that it's considered normal. So, this is a revolutionary way of looking at it and a revolutionary system that solves that problem because it tells you across 35 axes exactly where you are, what the next level up is, which is your destination if you're going to advance, and how to get there, which is that you go to the next level. So, all of this is completely new. Uh, I went to school for 28 years and was a very good student. I don't think anything like this has existed before on Earth, maybe on other planets. Who knows what goes on other planets? But I think this is entirely new. And the book has been out for 4 years, so there are people all over the world reading this and using this. And no one has ever said to me, I've had a lot of bright people interested in this. No one has ever said, wait a minute now, this is like so and so. That has not happened. So it just continually, conspicuous by its absence is anyone countervailing this belief that it's unique and revolutionary.
So it's basically a roadmap for the human life.
It's a roadmap for success
Okay.
across
So
35 axes.
so you have said that you can either go up or down one level, and there's a
Yes.
lot of coaches out there that are advertising that they help people break barriers, and they use things like vision boards and law of attraction to make big shifts. So am I hearing you say that big shifts are not possible?
No, changing level on these scales is the big shift.
Well, I mean, like going from 0 to 50s instead of 0 to 1.
Okay, so let me explain it this way. Let's say you're on the first floor and you want to go to the fifth floor. One way or another, you have to go through the second, the third, and fourth. Whether you take the escalator, the elevator, the stairs,
Okay.
or go outside the building and use a rope ladder. Okay, now, how fast that elevator moves, there are high speed elevators and low speed elevators. How
Okay.
fast that escalator moves. Some people can go faster than others. I do know axiomatically that some of these scales define persistent traits, meaning it's not easy to move on some of these scales. It's like turning an ocean liner. It takes about an hour to turn an ocean liner. No matter how much power it has, it's big, okay? As opposed to turning a bicycle. It takes a second to turn a bicycle. So some of these scales are what I call volatile scales, meaning they change quickly and easily.
Okay.
And this is fairly obvious if you study them, because I give lots of analogies and examples in the book of how this works so you can see quickly and easily. For example, the scale of basic purposes. Most people, probably more than 90%, spend an entire lifetime at one level of that scale. This is an advantage because once you find a person's level, whether it's your own or another's, that's not going to be different a month from now, or 2 months from now, or a year from now, or 20 years from now. So you see Joe, right, who you went to high school with. You spot his level. You go to the high school reunion 20 years later, he's still at that level. That is the norm. So that gives you a handle on who this person is.
I think it would also help in figure out where they're going, because if you're looking for a partner, you're not just looking for who am I and who are we right now. You're looking for who are we going to be in the future, and is this somebody that I can grow with?
Sure. Well, the whole point of this activity, Septemics, is that you find your level, what level you're at. When you do, you will have a realization. You'll say, oh, now I see why I can't get along with Mary, or something like that. See? Then you target yourself for the next level up. And if you make a serious effort, you will be able to get to that level because it's the next level up. See, if you're on a train, right? The train stops at 34th Street, next stop is 42nd Street. So you can get to 42nd Street from 34th Street because it's the next station.
Yeah.
But if you want to go to 57th Street, you're going to have to go through 42nd Street to get to 57th Street. So that's just built into the fabric of this universe. So I did the heavy lifting here through most of my life in defining exactly what these scales are empirically. There is no theory of septemics. This is all based on direct empirical observation. I wrote it down and I tested it and tested it and tested it for 40 years until there's a point at which you draw a conclusion that this is reality. Like before we had Newton's three laws of motion, physics as we know it didn't really exist. Okay? So, there's the story of the apple, and he realized it's the same force that keeps the moon going around the earth and the whole story. Well, and he said, well, there's these three laws. Here's what they are. Bang, bang, bang. Now, those of us in the physics world, to us, these laws are axiomatic. I mean, they almost seem like common sense, except for the fact that before Isaac Newton, who was obviously a genius, figured them out, nobody else figured them out, just like the theory of relativity. It has been proven conclusively many times to be true, even though it is counterintuitive. Okay? Physicists have been testing this for 100 years. Why did Einstein figure it out? How come nobody figured it out before he did? Because if you learn it, you realize it's embedded in the fabric of the universe. So the theory of relativity was true before Earth existed, and it will still be true after Earth ceases to exist because it's inherent. That is what the septemic scales are. These scales were true at least 6,000 years ago, probably more than that, but I don't know because my study only takes me back about six. We don't know too much about what went on before 6,000 years ago. But I know a lot about what happened in the last 6,000 years. And it just verifies all of this.
Okay,
Because
so I do
when
want to
you
talk about the
study people, you
scales.
see this at play. Go ahead.
I do want to talk about the scales, but before we do that, I want to ask you about another line that you put in your book.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that people who need power don't need to pursue it. Love that. That totally resonates. Can you
That's right.
say more about that?
Sure. Well, for example, the scale of control. I explain something that most people do not know, which is that control is an inherently good thing. There is no such thing as bad control. That is a misnomer. So every time you ever succeed at anything, it's because you can control it, right? So you get in your car, you drive your car around to your destination, right? You have no accident, you don't get a ticket, nothing. You're controlling the car. That is a good thing. So people say, well, wait a minute. Wasn't Hitler controlling the Jews? No. If he could control them the way we did in the United States, he would have taken advantage of all of their skills and intelligence and resources. But he couldn't control them, so he wanted to wipe them out. So this is what happens. The husband cannot control the wife, so he wants a divorce. If he could control the wife, he wouldn't want the divorce. So what do I mean by control? When you shake hands with a person, you're controlling them. When you hug someone, you're controlling them. When you smile at somebody when you pass them on the street, you're controlling them. These are good things. Now, failure comes from inability to control. So, when you talk about power, people get it mixed up with domination. Power is not domination. Okay? Elon Musk has power. There's no domination there. He's not killing people and threatening people and beating people up like Hitler did. He is doing his work, creating businesses, creating jobs, creating goods and services that people can use and benefit from, right? That's power. Or the Beatles. The Beatles, twice, the top 5 records on the list, the Billboard Top 100, were Beatle records. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Twice they did that. Nobody else has ever done anything remotely close to that. I don't think anybody else has even had 1 and 2. Okay? The Beatles have sold over 1 billion units of product. Nobody is remotely close to that. Okay? If you were around during Beatlemania, you saw that they had power. That is what John Lennon meant when he said, and got him in a lot of trouble, we're bigger than Jesus. He was right. Of course, the Jesus people, not that I have anything against them, a lot of them get offended at that. But I know what he said. It was an impolitic statement. Okay? Don't stick your face in political and religious things because it's going to get slapped. So I don't discuss politics and religion. So that was a mistake he made as a young man. But he was right. So that's power. There was no domination there. They just went out and played their songs. They recorded their songs, and people loved it. Okay? That's power. No dominate. What Hitler didn't have power. He had domination. So when the wife is mean to the husband, she insults him, she yells at him, she belittles him, that's domination. That's not control. So the husband comes home, right? He's late. She says, where were you? You're late. You're 15 minutes late for dinner. He says, I'm sorry. I got stuck in traffic. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry. Let's have dinner. She says, okay. See, he's explaining it to her. He's not saying, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me I'm late. I already had to sit in traffic for 2 hours. I don't want to hear that. No, that's not control. He controls her by explaining it to her in a non-judgmental way. This is what happened. She says, oh, see, that's control. So I have had people working for me my entire adult life. Even when I was in military school, I had people under my command. There's a way to do this. Okay? So when you see, like Joe Biden famously called Trump supporters garbage several months back, right? That's not control. He is out of control. That was stupid. Okay? It just helped Trump get elected. So that's not control. Control, if you watch people who are successful, they handle things in a rational, diplomatic way. Like when I was a young man, I was an athlete. And so I had that macho, aggressive thing that all football players have. If you don't have it, you can't play football, right? So somebody started something with me. I didn't get into a fight with him. See, that doesn't happen now because I've learned that's not control. You have to control your physiognomy. You have to control your face. You have to control your voice. You have to control your actions. You have to control whether or not you react to something. See, this is all good. So if somebody comes up to me and says, I say, okay, why do you think that? Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. See, that's control. Your guy feels, okay, he's listening to me. He's not threatening me. It's not going to end up in a fight. Whereas sometimes you see these young guys, guy says, are you looking at my girlfriend? Guy says, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Pulls out a gun and shoots him. This is not made up. These things go on. Okay?
They do.
They're people who are out of control. They're not controlling themselves. So I bump into people who try to start fights with me. I'm just going to say, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with them. Just let it go. Because what is the point? You see? So when you talk about power, okay, power is not banging the table and yelling at people. If you have power, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Powerful people speak rationally. They explain themselves. Like if you listen to Jordan Peterson, right? He's challenged continuously. He just explains. No, that's not what happened. This is what happened. See, he doesn't get uppity. He just explains these are the facts. And here's what the scientific literature says. about behavior, blah, blah, blah. See, he has a lot of power. People love that man. He's helped lots of people. So that is what Septemics is about. I'm giving you a way to control your life across 35 axes. And the across 35 axes is important because any person who has any problem, difficulty, situation, dilemma that has anything to do with people can successfully analyze that situation by one or more of these skills, usually more than one.
Love the vibe? Join the tribe. It's free, and the link is in the show notes. See you there.
Okay, so let's start looking at the scales. The one I want to start with is identity. I think that's a good place to start.
Okay.
I always have my clients start here because if you don't know who you are, then there's no way to, I don't know, it's kind of like, where am I? Where
Right.
do you go from there unless you know who you are? So can you tell me about that scale?
Well, let me say this. Where am I is true across all 35 scales.
Yes.
Every person is at some level on every scale. It's like a blood pressure. Everybody has a blood pressure. We don't know what it is because it changes. That's why every time you go to the doctor, doesn't matter if your ear hurts, your knee hurts, your nose is right, doesn't matter. You can't, whatever is wrong with you, they take your blood pressure. You know why? They don't know what it is. They know you have it, but they want to know what is it, and they write it down, right? That's what Septemics is like. You, Laura, are at some level on every one of these scales. And if you study the material, you can find your level. And when you find, you'll say, oh, yeah, this explains a lot. And then you'll be able to move up to the next level. So, to some degree, I'm rejecting the premise of your question because, in a sense, I mean, the scale of identity has a specific meaning, but in a sense, who you are is available on all 35 scales. So, really, the way to use this on someone who you want to help is find the scale that's relevant and use it to help the guy. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say your girlfriend, Gloria, is having relationship problems. Every time she talks to you, she says, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do about my husband. He's doing X, Y, and Z. It's driving me crazy. So you get tired of listening to this after 6 months. And you say, Gloria, let me show you something. Look at this. And you open the book to the scale of relationships. She doesn't know anything about this, right? You put it in front of her face. And she looks at it. She can read English. And she says, scale of relationships? You mean there's a scale of relationships? You say, yes. This relationship that you have been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? Guaranteed she's going to want to know that because she's having trouble. So she's going to look at it. And in a matter of seconds, she'll find a bracket. She'll say something like, well, I can see right away. It's definitely not 1, 2, or 3 because that's the top of the scale. We're having a lot of trouble. So you see, she got it down to 4, which is progress in seconds. Now you say it. Go ahead.
Don't you find that some people can have issues in more than one level?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. So now she goes, you say to look, that's good. You got it down to 4. Go ahead and read the text and then you can get it exactly. So she reads the text. It's not that long. You can help her as a tutor. And she comes back and she says, oh, now that I read this, I can see we're at level 5. That's not so good. That's near the bottom of this. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. And you say to her, you know, Gloria, if you wish, you can move this relationship up to level 4. You can? Yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that. Oh, but before you do that, let me show you something else. And you open up to the scale of sexuality. Well, that's relevant, isn't it? So she looks at it. She says, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? You say, yes. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on the scale? guaranteed she's going to want to know that. You see, because it's relevant to this mess that she's been living in. So
So
the
can you give
same
me,
thing.
like, on either one of them, the relationship or the sexuality scale, like examples of what 1 to 7 looks like?
Okay, let me just finish my analogy and then I'll go into that.
Okay.
So, so she looks at it. She's As soon as she looks at this, she's going to say scale of sexuality. You say, yeah, where are you on the scale? So guaranteed in a matter of seconds, I'm talking about 15, 20, 25 seconds, she's going to find a bracket. She's going to say, well, I can see right off 6 and 7 have nothing to do with us. So that's out. Okay, you say, go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. So she reads it, she comes back, and if she wants to disclose it to you, she might say, because you're her friend, she might say, well, I can see I'm at level 4. That's okay, that's in the middle of the scale, that's not too bad. But she might also say, and Joe, he's at level 5. Ah, no wonder we're having a lot of trouble. Those 2 points are not compatible. You see? So I could keep going doing this for 15, 20, 25 different skills because in a romantic relationship, it's complicated. There's a lot to it. See? So by the time she analyzes this across 25 scales, she's going to completely unravel this entire conundrum because every time she finds a level, she's going to have a realization, oh, that's why he does this. Ah, that's why I think about this every time he says that. She's going to have insight. And after a while, now what she does with that is up to her. She might say, this is great. I'm going to buy this book and go to Joe and straighten out this whole mess we have. That could happen. Or she might say, now that I did this, I'm not wasting any more time on this. This relationship is a dog. I'm out of here. So that's up to her. That's not for us to say. But the point is, she is gaining clarity. Okay? So you asked me about levels. So let's talk about the scale of basic purposes. Because what could possibly be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? Either your own or another's. That is what the person is trying to do all the time, whether he's successful or not. So if you just observe the person, you will see this in action. Somebody at level 3 on that scale is feathering his nest. That's what he's about. Gaining riches, winning. Okay? So you can see that in a person. So, for example, George Washington was at level 3 on that scale. He was probably the richest man in the colonies. Very successful guy. Okay? So he was not at any of these other levels. He was at this level. And once you realize that, when you study him, you can see, yeah, that makes sense. That fits with his basic purpose. So, for example, I'll go through the 7 basic purposes. The lowest of the 7 basic purposes is the purpose to destroy. Now, that's not going to make sense to most people because most people are not crazy. So they'll say, why would anybody have that for basic purpose? Well, the good news is it's not that many people who are at that level. Hitler was at that level. Okay? So that's his purpose was to destroy. And if you study the man, which I have, it is obvious that he was an inherently destructive person. Up from that, level 6 is the criminal. Purpose of the criminal is pleasure. This is not obvious. Why does the criminal rob banks? So he can buy drugs, alcohol, women, yachts, custom-made suits, big screen TVs. He wants pleasure. That's what motivates him. That tells you a lot. So someone who's not motivated by pleasure is not at that level. There are a lot of people, most of us, we're not primarily motivated by pleasure. We have other things that motivate us. Want to take care of the family, want to better ourselves, want to transcend. There's these other levels. So that is what the criminal is about. Now, the criminal, he does not particularly want to kill you, but he will if you get in his way. Because he wants pleasure. Oh, you're going to stop me from doing this drug deal? Bang, bang, you're dead. Because you're not going to stop me because I want that $1,000,000 so I can buy a chateau in the south of France. Okay? He does not particularly want to destroy, but he will if you get in his way. Now, up from that is level 5, which is the loser. The loser intends to suffer. This makes no sense to most people. This is the person who frustrates social workers. They say, oh, this poor person, I want to help him. Lots of luck. 20% of the people are at this level. These people are busy killing themselves with drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, gluttony, you name it. Driving too fast in cars. There's an unlimited number of ways that they make themselves suffer. Some of them make themselves physically sick. You know, like the type of guy, you see him 1 month he's got the flu, you see him the next month he's got anemia, you see him the next month he's got a foot that hurts. You know, he's literally making himself suffer by making himself sick. Now, unless you know about psychosomatic illness, this makes no sense to you. But those people, if you give the guy $50,000, he'll blow it in Vegas. If you give him a house, it'll burn down. If you give him, can introduce him to a girl to go out with, they'll break up. This guy is going to make himself suffer. That is who he is. There's nothing you can do to stop it because it is his basic purpose. Up from that at level 4 is the normal. This is the largest demographic group. It's about 30% of the population. The purpose of the normal is to conform. And you might say, well, conformity is not a good thing. Oh, really? Think of it this way. This guy wants to fit in. If everybody grows a mustache, he grows a mustache. When mustaches go out of style, he shaves it off. Why? Because he wants to fit in. If everybody gets an iPhone, he gets an iPhone because he wants to fit in. So this guy does not want to rock the boat. This is your normal guy. He's got a house with a mortgage. He's got a car with a car payment. He's got a wife, a couple of kids. He goes on vacation for 2 weeks. You know, he's got a 401k. He's got a normal person. So he does not want to harm anybody and does not want to hurt anybody. He just wants to live his life in whatever he thinks is normal. So in different cultures, normal means different things, right? Like in America, you see women going around in various states of undress, right? I mean, they have something on, but it's so little that it doesn't even matter if they had it on or not. It's the same effect. Well, in Islamic countries, you don't see that. See, it's a different normal. So, you go out now, in the last 30 years, it's extremely common to see women with an exposed midriff. 50 years ago, you did not see that. You had to get the person to go to bed with you before you could see that. See, it was a different culture. These guys just want to fit in. Above that, level 3 is the winner. The winner is feathering his nest. He wants to win. That's what's important to him. So, for example, if you look at Thomas Jefferson was a winner. He won and he won, and he won in 100 different ways. Boy, was he a winner. Now, he was not somebody who particularly wanted to risk his life. When the British finally got to Monticello, he took off. He wasn't going to stand up to them. He wasn't going to risk his life like Washington did. Washington was a different type of guy. So the winner, you can look at a person and say, oh, I see what this guy's doing. This is the guy, whether it's money, jewels, or if he's an actor, an Oscar, if he's a football player, a Super Bowl ring, or a trophy wife. These are all things that people collect. It's ways that they win. If you're a baseball player, you want to win the World Series. Every professional baseball player wants to win the World Series, right? That's the pinnacle for them. So the winner is the guy, that's what motivates him. That's his basic purpose. Above that, at level 2, is the leader. The purpose of the leader is to conquer. Now you might say, well, that's not a nice thing. Oh, really? That's a question of whose ox is being gored. So, for example, when the Allies conquered the Axis powers in World War II, for almost everyone, that was a good conquest. Even the people in Japan and Germany and Italy benefited from that because we got those crazy people out of their governments. And they all prospered. They did much better after that. So the leader is some person who wants to conquer, like Winston Churchill. If Winston Churchill had not been elected prime minister, the English would have surrendered. I have studied this subject for decades. Neville Chamberlain and his associates, they wanted to surrender. The Germans did not hate the English. They did not want to fight the English. They did not want to conquer the English. The English are German people. The Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes were Germans before they came to that island. So it would have been very easy. Now, what the fly in that ointment was that Churchill was a leader. He wanted to conquer, and he did. Remember his famous speech, "We'll fight on the beaches. We will never surrender." And he got, because of his leadership ability, he got the English people behind him to make terrible sacrifices to win that war. So that is what you get from a leader. Now, leaders do not have easy lives. After Churchill saved the world for democracy, he was voted out of office. After Lincoln saved the Union and freed the slaves, he got a bullet in the back of his skull from John Wilkes Booth. That is what happens to leaders. Same thing with Alexander Hamilton, another leader. Got killed at age 51 by Aaron Burr, a political opponent. Now, Burr had good reason to be irritated at Hamilton, but that's not a good reason to kill somebody, right? So, but that's what happens to these people. They have terrible things happen to them. Martin Luther King is another one. He was a leader. His conquest was the conquest of racism. So they took him out. So above that, level 1 is the saint. The saint wants to transcend. That is his purpose. They do not want money, fame, adulation, sex, notoriety. They don't want any of that stuff. They want to transcend. Now, how they articulate that varies according to their religion. So if you talk to a Buddhist, he says he wants to attain nirvana. If you talk to a Christian, he says he wants to go to heaven. But they're still transcending. So you have saints in every religion. So you'll find these people in ashrams, monasteries, rectories, nunneries, and so forth. I'm not saying all the people in there are saints. Some of them are not. But that's where you'll find them, because they're not going to be on Wall Street making money. They don't care about money. If you talk to a Christian at this level, he'll say, my immortal soul is the most important thing to me. And that's what
So
they pursue.
do you ever get anybody, say at a level 4 or below, who's looking at these scales and saying, you know what, I'm looking up and this is where I'm supposed to be heading. That's not attractive to me. Does that happen?
Well, let me put it to you this way. One of the axioms of this subject, which, by the way, you can see the axioms on my website if you wish, is when a person is at or near the top of any scale, it's because he's insightful in that area. When a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. So someone who's low on any scale is going to have trouble with that scale.
Okay.
it's going to be gobbledygook to him.
Okay.
If he had insight in that area, he wouldn't be at or near the bottom of the scale. So there are people who are what you might call downscale people. They're at or near the bottom of many scales. They're not going to get this. So let's say you find some professional criminal who's also a drug addict. Okay? This guy, the reason he's like that is because he's at or near the bottom of many of the scales, if not most. If he were a more upscale person, he would have enough insight to say, this is not a good way to go. I shouldn't be a drug addict and I shouldn't be committing crimes every day. I should get a college degree and get a nice job and then not have the police after me. See, but he doesn't have that insight. So it's not just this scale, any scale.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have actually calculated, and remember, I'm an engineer, I actually calculated about 50% of the human race wants to improve oneself for others. Those are the people for whom this book is directed. So, the person, if you talk to psychopaths, sociopaths, professional criminals, war criminals, corrupt politicians, serial murderers, insane people, idiots, ignoramuses, these people are not going to be into this book. They're not up to it. For whatever reason, I just gave you a whole bunch of reasons, categories of people. So if you go into, for example, the mafia, something like 95% of them would not read this book. And if somehow you could get them to read the book, they wouldn't understand it. And even if they did understand it, they wouldn't apply it because it's contrary to their way of life. Because this book is about improving conditions. And somebody who's in the mafia, he's not there because he wants to improve himself. If he wanted to improve himself, he'd be meditating, or he'd be going for therapy, or he'd be watching certain videos that cover that. There's lots of them now. Or he'd be reading Jordan Peterson. No, he's not doing that. He's holding up gas stations, selling phony ID. He's doing whatever he can make money from, right? And if anybody gets in his way, he beats them up or he shoots them. So that's not who this book is for. So if you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you if you can read English. Now, why do I say yourself or others? It works equally on yourself or others. So you find yourself on all of these different levels, and every time you do, you have an insight about yourself. And then you can start moving up these scales. But also you're going to say, why does Joe do that? I don't get it. You find him on a certain scale. He's a level 6 on the scale of control. That explains it. See? Now you know what's going on with him in that aspect, in that axis. And you can analyze him across 35 axes. And by the time you do that, you will understand him better than he understands himself, which means you will be empowered to deal with him in the best way. Now, maybe the best way to deal with him is to say, bye-bye, so long, farewell. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's to say, come here, look at this book. This will help you. Really? Look at this, yes. See, and get him to use the book or do something else. Maybe he needs to get into therapy. So you could have a person who has an 180 IQ, he's got $20 million in the bank, and he's got a supermodel for a wife. You might say, well, this guy doesn't need this book. Oh, really? He's got a daughter who's getting into drugs. He's got a son who gets into fistfights. He's got a wife who's fooling around behind his back. See? All those people could be helped by him intervening using this book. And
So the book is called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And where can people get it?
Well, you can get it, of course, on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, all those places. It's available wherever books are sold. If you just
Okay.
type the word Septemics into a search engine, you'll get hundreds of responses, including all the people selling the book.
And if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Well, about me and about Septemics, I invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com,
Okay.
Septimics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it. You can read the reviews, you can read sections of the book itself, and you can listen to, if you wish, a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics that explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. And I'll have those links in the show notes, of course. So I think it's important to have some type of guide to help us through life. And I appreciate you sharing yours with us. Thanks for being here.
You're very welcome.
See you guys next week.
Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, why not show your love with a review? Thanks. See you next week.